DB audit report tampering case. The Kuala Lumpur High Court this morning ruled that the prosecution failed to provide sufficient evidence to prove their case that Najib had tampered with the report to cover up wrongdoings. His co-accused in the case, former 1MDB chief Arul Kanda was also acquitted.
Justice Muhammad Zaini Mazlan, in his judgment, said the prosecution failed to establish a prima facie case against the duo and that there was no evidence that Najib had explicitly directed the amendment made to 1MDB final audit report to exonerate himself from any civil or criminal liability. He added the former Prime Minister was merely concerned that the audit report could be spun politically, and the amendment to the report was based on the former Auditor General Tan Sri Amrin Buang's judgment. The judge also noted that Amrin's audit of 1MDB was independently done based on documents provided by Arul Kanda, noting that this would not have been necessary if the fund's management team had been more cooperative in the audit. Najib's lawyer, Tan Sri Muhammad Shafi Abdullah, said the acquittal has lifted Najib's spirit and reignited his desire to fight.
Communicated to us, as you know, he can't give a press statement. Number one is that he is so relieved that the judge has made these findings, because it is not merely an acquittal and discharge. You must see that it is beyond that. The judge could have just said there is no prima facie case, acquitted and discharged both the persons. But the judge made specific findings. In the case of Arul Kanda, it is a certificate given to him where he is removed from any blameworthiness, and he is found to be a credible person.
The High Court ruled that no further civil or criminal proceedings can be brought against Arul Kanda in relation to the 1MDB audit report case. Presently, Najib is in prison serving a 12-year sentence after being found guilty of abuse of power, criminal breach of trust and money laundering in the SRC international case. He is currently seeking a judicial review of the conviction, which is set to be decided before the end of March. Until Friday, Najib had not won any legal battles over the 42 1MDB charges that have been levelled against him.
The federal government will be channeling 50 million ringgit in immediate flood assistance to Johor. Prime Minister Dato' Sri Anwar Ibrahim said the allocation would be used to help flood victims and for other urgent needs in the state. This is on top of the 10 million ringgit allocation announced by the Deputy Prime Minister Dato' Sri Ahmad Zahid Hamidi to purchase essential goods for flood victims. The number of flood victims in Johor continue to rise, with over 33,000 people evacuated to 217 relief centres as of Friday morning. The floods have also resulted in 3 deaths in the state, 2 in Segamat and 1 in Kluang. Meanwhile, Communications and Digital Minister Fahmi Fazil said the government had no plans to declare an emergency in Johor following the floods. Instead, he said they will examine what assets could be mobilised immediately to help affected residents, including the need to roll out Bailey bridges to ensure connectivity. In a separate matter, Fahmi said his ministry will look into amending the National Film Development Corps or FINAS Act. The decision was made after meeting with the CEO of FINAS and finding that additional amendments were required to suit the growing industry.
Fahmi also said that the structure of the agency's board of directors was another issue to look into. He added that his ministry, together with the Ministry of Domestic Trade and Cost of Living, would set up a task force to deal with royalty issues within the Malaysian music industry. Domestic Trade and Cost of Living Minister Dato' Sri Salahuddin Ayub had said the task force would discuss solutions on payments and calculations of royalties. It would also look into the establishment of a single body to resolve licensing issues and protecting copyright owners.
The Malaysian Aviation Commission, or MAVCOM, is considering imposing higher fines on airlines that reschedule flights, says Transport Minister Anthony Loke. He said strict action must be taken against airlines to ensure flight cancellations or rescheduling did not occur.
In a parliamentary reply, Lok said at present, airlines that cancelled or delayed flights due to factors under their control, such as technical related issues or an inability to meet passenger demand, must reimburse passengers within 30 days or offer alternative flights as stipulated under the Malaysian Aviation Consumer Protection Code. If the airlines fail to comply, MAVCOM may impose a fine not exceeding 200,000 ringgit. A second instance of non-compliance will lead to a fine 10 times the amount of the initial fine. According to Lok, MAVCOM has issued 4.72 million ringgit in penalties over airlines' failure to abide by the code from 2018 to January 2023. MAVCOM, he added, is currently working on improving the code that is estimated to be completed in the second quarter of this year.
With Malaysia's healthcare problems recently under the spotlight, how has the government fared in their first 100 days addressing some of the grievances faced by patients and healthcare workers? Dr. Kor Siew Keng, co-founder of Malaysian Health Coalition, shares what the government has done right.
Maybe 2 or 3 wins from the first 100 days might look like the following. Firstly, there have been increased attention as well as numbers of permanent posts for health professionals in Malaysia. So we have converted many contract pharmacists and doctors and paramedics to full-time permanent positions, and that is a good thing. The second trend in the right direction would be that Minister Dr. Zaleha has committed to introducing the Health White Paper in Parliament in June-July this year. And this is a continuation from a predecessor Minister Khairi Jamaluddin. And the Health White Paper should survive all health ministers, all prime ministers, because reforms of any health system will take 20, 30 years or so. If we look at the experience from South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, these reforms will take 20 to 30 years and therefore need to survive the comings and goings of health ministers and prime ministers. So that's the second trend in the right direction. The third trend in the right direction is that the budget allocation for 2023 is higher than one for 2024. What we think among health professionals and in the Malaysian Health Coalition is that these numbers needs to be having a scheduled, predictable increase year on year, so that the Ministry of Health will be able to plan for multi-year projects with some certainty of funding instead of being reliant year on year on what the Finance Ministry is giving to them. Those are the 3 early wins.
Moving forward, Dr. Kor emphasizes on the importance of public-private partnership to solve the issue of overcrowding at government hospitals. He also revisits the idea of a healthcare reform commission that was earlier proposed by the Health Ministry.
145 government KKM hospitals, about 11 university hospitals and 5 military hospitals are just what we have in the public sector. But the private sector has about 200 private hospitals, about 8,000 private clinics, and a total of about 22,000 hospital beds. That's a significant resource in Malaysia's health system overall that we can tap on to decongest waiting lines at emergency departments, decongest hospital beds, deliver better healthcare, and so on.
There is no time to lose, says Dr. Kor, when it comes to investing in long-term measures to better the healthcare system. This can begin with establishing a reform commission.
Start the process for long-term reforms in Malaysia. There's a long list of all the things that we need to reform. My personal favorite is to categorize them into 3: human capital, sustainable financing, and organization of service delivery. What does service delivery mean? How many clinics and hospitals do you need? How much private and public healthcare do you need? These are the 3 main areas for us to, reform. But to do that reform, we probably need a health reform commission, which has been described in the healthcare white paper, and that health reform commission will guide the reforms for the next 10, 20, 30 years or so. And that will be one important vehicle for Malaysia to survive any political transition, like administrations change, ministers change, and that's all good and fine and natural and desirable even. The Health Reform Commission will be there to guide the reforms for the next 20 to 30 years.
We continue our conversation on Dato' Sri Anwar Ibrahim's first 100 days as Malaysia's 10th Prime Minister tonight on Consider This. What lessons should he take? What changes should he make? We speak to our guests about the strengths and weaknesses of his premiership so far. We'll go for a quick break. Don't go anywhere.
Cuaca panas menyebabkan kelumomo, minyak dan kegatalan? Clearman 100% untuk para lelaki. Teknologi anti kelumomo 3 kali ganda. Tiada kelumomo, minyak atau kegatalan. Dingin pada kulit kepala. Clearman terbukti menewaskan kelumomo.
Industri penuh peraturan. Seharusnya kita punya pilihan. Impian kita tak terbatas kerana kita ada pilihan tanpa had. Bergerak dengan lekas, dengan pilihan pantas. Tetapkan pilihanmu, bikin sampai jadi caramu dengan Hotlink hari ini. Mara mencipta arus di rangkaian menyeluruh untuk Malaysia. Inilah caraku, cara kita. Sampai jadi.
Welcome back. Rescue workers continue to search for those missing at a train crash site in northern Greece as the death toll reaches 57. Public anger grows as more protesters gather in capital Athens to voice outrage and sorrow over the country's worst ever rail disaster.
Railway unions massed outside the headquarters of Greek rail operator Hellenic Train and planned a second 24-hour strike on Friday, calling the government out on what they describe as a dangerous failure to modernize the rail system. Police said a protest in Thessaloniki turned violent, with demonstrators throwing stones and patrol bombs. 3 days of national mourning has been declared in the country. On Tuesday, a passenger service carrying 350 people collided with a freight train just before midnight after they ended up on the same track, causing the front carriages to burst into flames. Police hoped for recovery work to end on Friday, but said it was still unclear how many more are missing. Most of the passengers involved were students, as the accident occurred soon after a holiday weekend.
Prominent Cambodian opposition leader Kem Sokha has been sentenced to 27 years under house arrest for treason. The former leader of the now dissolved Cambodian National Rescue Party, CNRP, has also been barred from standing or voting in elections.
Kem Sokha was first arrested in 2017. He was accused of conspiring with foreign powers to overthrow Prime Minister Hun Sen, who has ruled Cambodia for nearly 4 decades. Kem Sokha has denied the charges, saying the case against him was baseless, while his legal team have said they would appeal the verdict. The CNRP was banned ahead of a 2018 election, and most of its leaders have either been prosecuted or forced into exile. Last month, Hun Sen shut down one of the country's last independent media outlets, called Voice of Democracy, for publishing a story that allegedly attacked his son and damaged the government's reputation. Cambodia is set to hold its next general election in July, with Hun Sen expected to either run again or hand over power to his eldest son.
Half of the world's population is expected to be classified as obese or overweight by 2035, according to the World Obesity Federation. Its latest report, the World Obesity Atlas 2023, warns that more than 4 billion people will be affected if action is not taken.
No country has seen a decline in obesity prevalence since 1975. Low or middle-income countries in Africa and Asia are expected to see the greatest rises in the coming years. Reasons include trends in dietary preferences towards more processed foods, weaker policies to control food supply and marketing, as well as healthcare services that lack resources to assist in weight management and education. The report predicts that the global economic impact of overweight and obesity will reach $4.32 trillion annually by 2035 if prevention and treatment measures do not improve. It also highlighted the rising rates of obesity among children and teenagers, with figures expected to double from 2020 levels for both boys and girls. This means more adolescents are now more likely to develop type 2 diabetes, have heart disease risk factors or orthopedic problems as they enter adulthood.
That wraps up AWANI Tonight. I'm Fana Sheh. Thank you for watching.
Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. March 3rd marks exactly 100 days since Anwar Ibrahim was elected Malaysia's 10th Prime Minister. Now, what have been the strengths and weaknesses of his premiership so far? Joining us on the show now is Executive Director of Merdeka Centre, Ibrahim Sufyan, better known as Ben. Thank you so much for joining me on the show tonight. Ben, what did Merdeka Centre's most recent survey show about public sentiment of Anwar Ibrahim's first 100 days in office?
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. Thanks for having me on. We carried out a survey about 75 days into the administration, and what we found was that at that point in time, more than two-thirds of Malaysians were satisfied with how Anwar Ibrahim performed in his role as the Prime Minister. And this, in many ways, represents a surprising result because, we've been tracking sentiments and also public approval for various leaders for a number of years. And in the lead-up to the election, Anwar Ibrahim didn't poll very high. But I think once he has taken over the role, the position as the PM, and I think the initial statements and the public actions that he has done, I think have won him some support within the public, particularly younger Malaysians.
Okay, what are the things that have won him the support, Ben?
I think number one, Melissa, is that the unity government itself, vast majority of Malaysians are fatigued with political infighting and unending uncertainty about the stability of the government. So many people do believe that with the formation of this unity government between Pakatan Harapan and Barisan Nasional and also the Borneo Party, the stability of the government would be more assured. They're more likely to stand rather than fall apart. I think that's one. Number two, with the inclusion of Barisan Nasional into the unity government, at least, nearly one half or just slightly under one half of the Malay Muslim population has voted for this government. So while that is not in the majority, but that's a lot more sizable than what Pakatan Harapan enjoyed in 2018. So a lot of the insecurities of some segments of Malay Bumi Putra voters that were present in the 2018 iteration of Pakatan Harapan seems to have dissipated somewhat. And then thirdly, I think this is important to note, I think Anwar Ibrahim came right off the bat speaking that he's going to address the economic problems of the country. And then one of the initial acts of trying to form a committee of government officials to address cost of living issues, I think that all was taken in quite well by members of the Malaysian public.
Okay, so those are the things that have won him some support. What would you say are the things that have caused him to lose support?
Well, I think at this point in time, or at least at the point in time when we carried out the survey, his support level is quite significantly positive. However, I think moving forward, there definitely will be some challenges in maintaining support. And I think these are going to draw upon two major factors. Number one would be how the economy performs in the coming months and years ahead. A lot of times, new leaders come into the picture and then the support or popularity dissipates when the leader has to take on unpopular but necessary actions. That we've seen happen time and again with the various leaders of this country. The second issue that we think he's going to be confronted with relates to the situation involving some leaders in his administration, particularly those that are facing court cases. So there's going to be public interest in how those individuals are going through their court cases and whether or not the cases are going to be judged independently, impartially. So I think those are two things that will determine the rise or fall of the popularity of the Prime Minister.
Okay, on that note, Ben, has Merdeka Centre done any surveys to gauge public perception towards Zahid Hamidi? I'm curious to know whether public perception towards Zahid Hamidi has changed now from, say, before the elections.
Well, we did. When we carried out the survey, we also put in a number of names in the list. We didn't put it out in the public space the other day because we wanted just public discussion to focus on the PM, government, and some of the key issues. But we found that public approval for Zahid Hamidi remains relatively low compared to many of the national level leaders that we've tested. It is slightly higher, marginally higher, so compared to in the lead up to the election. So I think Zahid Hamidi remains a figure that is having a tough time to win over the public. So I think until he clears his name in the courts, I think he's going to have this dark cloud hanging over him.
Does that affect the way the public sees this union?